We have in the studio Baba Yusuf, who is a strategist, policy analyst, and the Group CEO of Global Investment and Trade Company. Also, Asiegbu, a policy and development practitioner, Charles Asiegbu. He is also joining to give his perspectives on this issue. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome to the program. All right. Now let's start with this retreat. I'm not sure, it's not a new thing to have, retreats for the government appointees, as first thing, after the appointments and so on. It's a good one to prepare their minds and so on. How critical is this retreat? Let's start with you, Baba Yusuf, at this point in time.
Well, like you rightly said, Ayuba, it's traditional to have retreats at this point in time. First of all, we have a new administration. Mr. President he has already set the tone, but he wants to essentially set the ball rolling. The second key reason is we are coming to the end of a year. Normally, everybody does strategy, direction setting for the next year. We know the budget will also be prepared. So the timing is very right. And key amongst the takeouts of this retreat, why it is different is because of the way Mr. President decides to theme it up and to dimension it, looking at a very, very different perspective to it, not just the normal, retreat, which is more like laid back and people just basically, I consider the previous ones, especially in the last 8 years, as talk shop retreats and backslapping retreat. But this is setting the essence. I call it setting the essence and purpose for the team. I'm basically telling them reiterating rather, because he has said it, how he wants to do it. Before he said he's going to run a performance-driven Federal Executive Council, but now he has come to say how he intends to do it, by setting up the unit, the performance driver, if you like, headed by Hadiza Bala Usman, Special Advisor on Policy Coordination, and basically reading the terms and condition of how he's going to do this. That is what is succinct and differentiates it from the other ones. So people I'm sure now have come out with re-energized and focused on delivery of their mandates. We wait to see the outcomes.
Indeed, we wait. All right, so Charles Asiegbu, let's talk about, what specific policy initiative that we are expecting to be discussed in this retreat. What is your take on the policies?
Okay, first I would like to say that the retreat was a mixed bag of the traditional and then some new trends. Traditional in the sense that the previous administrations, Jonathan administration, Buhari administration, have had this kind of retreats, and some of the happenings in terms of what was taught in terms of the trainings were the same. So for me, I want to first say that the retreat addressed key, functions, roles, what is expected of them in the office and all of that, but it did not necessarily narrow down to the specific needs of each of the ministries, which I think was where they missed it, because, if you used 3 days to talk about the generic, you would have moved into specific with another 3 days, so that people address issues that are, key to their ministries. In terms of policy, the president has outlined 8 priority areas, and he thinks those are the areas he wants to focus keenly on: economy, poverty eradication, unemployment, agriculture, and all of that. But I noticed something. I didn't see health. I didn't see education. So are you saying that health, education are not priority areas? Does it mean the ministers of health should tailor all of his objectives or plan towards poverty eradication, for example? So these are some of the gaps I noticed. But one thing that I must commend the president for is his ability to come out and talk directly to the ministers. He came out, talked tough. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I told him he tried to renew our hope yesterday at the retreat. He tried to renew our hope by talking tough and speaking to the issues and telling them what he expects of them, and also saying that he was going to sack people who are not going to be functioning. All of this happened previously as well. President, in terms of the performance bond that is expected to be signed by the appointees and the president and all of it, it happened during the Buhari era, it happened during the Jonathan era, but we didn't see any of the ministers punished for non-performance. Some of the ministers at that time, some of them said that they didn't have enough funds to operate. Others said they didn't really understand what the bond was all about. So these are some of the key issues. And I thought another good way to address it was to look at what did not work previously, because there's a compendium of the key, the special advisor on policy coordination and delivery, Hadiza Bala Usman, came to say, okay, there's going to be KPIs, to check performance and all of that. The last administration had a compendium, it's almost a 400-page document of all of what is expected, the objectives, the metrics, the measures, what is expected of every ministry, and how to tackle it. So, I mean, it would have been good to also talk about what did not work in the last administration.
Okay, Baba Yusuf, it's one thing to have these retreats, it's one thing to share your vision as a leader with your lieutenants, in this journey, and it's another for them to actually key into your vision, because most times we've seen how conflict of interest, frustrates the realization or implementation of plans and agendas by governments. Is this retreat, or I would say, can you say that confidently that this retreat have actually addressed those areas, and how can we go beyond just the retreats and the rhetorics and the talk to real, implementation of plans?
From my experience of over 20 years of doing these kind of things, basically those 3 days are supposed to be, if you like, the articulation of conversations and discussions that have happened beforehand with regards to the granular. I have personally seen Hadiza Bala Usman speaking on how she had engaged one-on-one those ministers to discuss the details of the performance bond and all that, which was not done in the past in terms of granular and the hows and the whens. Very important. We don't expect a president and federal executive council to get holed up in a place for 6 days discussing way forward and retreat. It's not done. At that level, you have already gotten your briefings beforehand, after you've gotten your mandate already. So the whole idea is to come and sit down, listen to the focal point, which is the president, and set the tone and set the timelines and all that for things to be done with regards to the performance. What is important for me is that famous clip that the media has been repeating with regards to the president. I won't call it a riot act, but setting the essence of what he wants to do, to say, if you perform, you stay with us. If you miss the target, we review, and if you don't, you are out. And lastly, the buck stops on my table. No president in recent history, apart from President Olusegun Obasanjo and late Musa Yar'Adua and Umar Musa Yar'Adua, have demonstrated that. Now he has done that in talking. What remains to be seen is in the action. But what I'm saying is that Mr. President himself has set himself up, if you like, for us to now measure him as the president, and then let it cascade to the other people. What remains to be seen now is going forward. We already have the details. We'll be dimensioning and milestoning and following up to ensure that they deliver. You wanted to say something?
Yes, it sounds very simple. In the past administration, what we've seen is that it looked very difficult to hire and fire appointees. Like, you had certain individuals in government that will always err, and members of the public will talk and talk, and nothing happens. Even the president, sometimes it gets to a point where it seems like he's lamenting about his own appointees, and as if there's like nothing he can do. So the political will here is very key. This is the first administration of the current administration of President Bola Tinubu, who is likely going to be seeking another second term. How much of politics do you think will stand on his way in doing the right thing?
Two things, first of all, or three. First of all, we need to look at the personality type of the current president. It's different from the past president. Let's use President Buhari and President Jonathan, for example. Personality type of a leader should key into the time. Antecedents should speak for the person. What is the personality type? We have for the first time in a long time, or for the first time, a man that has multidimensional skill set. Private sector background, public sector, then a consultant, an accountant, and a doer more than a talker, because antecedent is very key in what we do. We cannot see the future, but we can use what has gone past to predict possibly what will happen in the future. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not a man that is shy to sack people. Secondly, he has done a lot of politicking build-up. So I reckon, based on what you said, from a strategic point of view, looking at 2027, for example, he knows for sure that he has a different setting of Nigerians than the setting of Nigerians of 8 years ago. People that are more conscious, are more hungry for delivery than ever before. And therefore, winning election will be less transactional than it used to be. That being said, this for me, from a strategic point of view, if I'm standing at the back of Mr. President, he is doing reverse psychology for this team. For example, the highly politicized or political people in this cabinet, he has set the ball rolling, he has made it public, he has his matrices. He's not a laissez-faire leader. He's a president that is assertive. So which means, if you don't deliver and he sacks you, there won't be political undertones. There won't be ethnic or tribal colorations, because he has come to tell everybody, this is it. And after all, I've been blamed for hiring you for political reasons. Now it remains for you to deliver. So I think for Mr. President, it is imperative for him to deliver more than ever before. Don't forget, and I'm very sure Mr. President is aware, the number of people that did not vote for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu are more than those that voted for him. And that is a critical factor to consider for somebody like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So I think that is very important. And for me, when we have a conversation later, you will see why that is critical for the delivery, of this. Like you rightly said, this is the first administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to see how this will impact. Another thing, in the past 8 years, what we used to see, or 10 years, was what I call self-appraisals. With due respect to all the optics of giving us performance boards and compendiums of 400 pages, to be honest, I didn't see more punchy focal point conversations like now. You see all the ministers, they will come and do self-appraisal. Nobody was appraising them. Now you have a unit that is going to drive it, and he reiterated it. What remains to be seen is how it is going to play out.
All right. It's talking about accountability, Asiegbu. What are the, as a policy and development practitioner, what are the best strategies for the government to make sure that they show a level of at least commitment to transparency and accountability? Because we keep coming back to that same point where people are assigned a job to do and they don't really deliver, and nobody holds them accountable for that. So how do you think the government needs to do in order to prove their commitment to this?
Okay, so I would like to speak to what Mr. Baba Yusuf said about how there's a unit that has been specifically set aside to ensure that people do their jobs. It existed in previous administration, and that's why I said these issues is a mixed bag of both the traditional and the new. The new is just, in terms of few, changes here and there, but traditionally some of these things already exist. The Policy and Coordination Delivery Unit was domiciled in the office of the SGF in the previous administration. The difference now is that there's a special advisor, I think, a special advisor that is now, coordinating the affairs. But how does the government assess itself? Right? It's already problematic for someone like me that believes in systems. So if you have a government, an appointee that is supposed to assess other appointees, or whose office is supposed to assess, how do you manage class of interest? And there are issues of inter-agency rivalry in the country, in Nigeria. We know about how agencies do not work together. How do you manage it? If you listen to the president's speech, he spoke about if you meet Adiza and you don't, there's a problem, you come to me. He knows that there's definitely going to be a problem. So how do you make the process seamless? How do you hold these people accountable? And that was why I said you use another 3 days to talk specifically to the issues that concern your specific sector. If you're in agriculture, what are the emerging trends? What are the gaps? Who is involved? Where are projects and programs grounded and stopped at the last time? And how do you move forward from there? And in holding government accountable, you cannot do it all by yourself without involving the critical stakeholders. So if you had the 3 days and you called in the private sector, the union executives, called in CSOs and NGOs, and and development partners who have over time funded some of these activities to come on board and talk about these issues, then we can say, okay, you're having a real third-party system in place. The special advisor talked about building an app where people are able to access, citizens are able to send information and all of that. To show seriousness, I was expecting her department to send a demo copy or provide a barcode or a link where people can already begin to see what is already done. If you say you're going to start assessing people from 2024 January, then by now we should already see the app running and working, even though we might not start immediately, but we should see some things in place to show that this is not just talks. So the idea is there, the pronouncements are there, but to drive a policy change and to bridge the gap between goals and outcome, we need to begin to see, in Nigeria, we have a lot of policies, a lot of things going on that we don't even know. Sometimes there's the case of us duplicating efforts, right? So we need to actually match our words with action this time around. I was hoping that as they were making that pronouncement, they are saying, okay, scan this barcode, this is the app, this is what has been done so far, this is preliminary, this is how we are already assessing, this is the result. She said she went to...
So you're talking about the public now, this barcode accessing to the public, isn't it?
Yes.
What are the parameters? What do we know so far about this result delivery unit, and how are they going to be assessing the performance of these ministers? Let me let you speak to that before.
Yes, so like I said, it's more or less at the ideation stage. It's more of the idea, what they think or how it should go, right? The how is not very clear, right? The special advisor has come out to say that they will be assessing the ministries one by one, and then there will be a scorecard at the end of the year or something like that. And all of these are good ideas, right? But in terms of the how, we do not necessarily know how it will be done. It is still at the stage where, I'm sure they haven't figured it out. And that is why I said there's a need to take more time to talk about these issues, bring experts on board, and begin to marshal out how you want to achieve this thing.
Okay, Baba Yusuf, many Nigerians, I'm sure, are very interested in seeing how this performance will be assessed. Is it in terms of punctuality coming to the office? I heard some people say, the other time we had a minister, went to one of the ministries where, latecomers were shut out, from accessing the office and so on. So how? The issue of how is very important to the implementation of this, very interesting policy.
Yes, the how, for me, to be honest, I wouldn't want to overflog the issue, and I won't be in the business of second-guessing leaders. We have given a mandate to a president. For me, is to wait and assess at the right time. The granular of the back office is not what really concerns me, but I'm very interested in what you said with regards to strategic imperatives that will deliver, which are the hows, and all the outcry with regards to, ab initio, there were no consequences for non-action, for non-performance. Punctuality, I was in this studio, we discussed about that, Minister, and you know my opinion with regards to saying you have come early and all that. Performance is not measured by events, performance are measured by results and outcomes, and that's what it is. So for me, I can discuss possibly some notes I took about what I consider the critical success factors for them. Whatever they are doing in the back office, what we want to see is dollar crashing. We want to see the multidimensionally poor index, improving and people getting out of that logjam. And for each and every ministry to have a guiding template for them, because I reckon that the ministers also should have their own retreats and strategy sessions on how they intend to deliver the individual. The president shouldn't be in the business of getting them together to teach them how to do their job. In ab initio, it means they are not supposed to be there. People that are professors, that are captains of industry and are coming, we are going to start telling you how you walk and how you crawl, then there's a problem. But what I expect is ministers to go back and sit with their heads of MDAs, parastatals and all, and have their own silo.
Okay.
So moving on, those strategic imperatives, for example, anti-corruption, leadership from the front in terms of pragmatism and quintessential leadership, don't tell people to be hungry while the cost of living is escalating, cost of governance have not been reduced. With regards to projects, how do you prioritize your projects? What are the quick wins? Avoid white elephants. What is the transparency and integrity of the processes, for example, procurement processes going forward? Without these critical imperatives, all this will be talk shop. 6 months down the line, people will still be talking about vested interest, talking about putting money in white elephants. So I expect part of what will go to them are this, if you like, a similar template that will guide all their actions in their various ministries to say, hey, we don't want to see this. With regards to clashes, I think it's the leadership type at the top, because he has said it, and I think it's okay for him to say, if you have a problem with Hadiza Bala, come to me.
Exactly.
That is that is providing an escalation, a pipeline to say, guys, it's not going to be like before. And if it means that Hadiza has to come and report to me that there's a problem, then you have a problem with me. It is normal in any engagement like this. There must be an escalation point. Of course, it goes without saying that he's an escalation point. But he's telling everybody there that this is business. I'm not speaking for Mr. President, but if I were in his shoes, that's exactly what I would do. Clashes of interest with a guy with a CEO of a parastatal taking up a minister and nothing happens. I don't foresee it happening in this administration. But if it does, then
this is exactly where I was going. Do you think that there's any rationale behind giving the person of Hadiza Bala that office, considering her history in the NPA when she was, the CEO in that place? Between her and the Minister of Transportation, for instance, we knew what happened at the time. There were allegations of corruption, and so on. And so on. So, is there any rationale behind giving her this? And do you think that her office will be able to really put a check on some of these excesses when it comes to clashes of interest, and whether the SGF, for instance, and the chief of staff and so on, whether there will be that coordination?
I'm of the opinion that Mr. President deliberately gave this task to a special advisor. I'm talking about the office, not the personality, to give a focal point. The SGF office is this huge, office, that is driving the entire government. And I think it's okay for him to say, this time around, let me have a focal point that has my ears, that will drive this, that will be focused on this, which is fine. Secondly, with regards to the person of Hadiza Bala Usman, I will consider it politics. And for me, I don't want to consider it as an issue now. I'm going to look at how Hadiza is going to play out as special advisor on policy coordination and as the critical driver of this performance management system, if you like. Now, with regards to her role, it is not an executive role, and she's very much aware of that. She's just an internal consultant. That's what she is, so to speak. And she's just marshalling and coordinating information, possibly create a dashboard for him to say this is where we are based on initially set criteria to say this is where we are. So she's just basically a repertoire, and a reportage kind of platform. At the end of the day, the president said the box stops at his table. And then where there are red or amber flags is for her to raise them and say, Mr. President, I think you need to look at this. I don't see her, except if she oversteps her boundary, and we will wait to see whether what happened in MPA between she was one of those CEOs that was taking up a minister, which to me is a very big issue. But this time around, either she has learned from her lessons, or she has a president that would not allow it to happen. So at the end of the day, if there's an amber issue, I don't expect Hadiza Bala Usman to take up the minister. I expect her to report for the for the president's attention, to take decisions. That is how I expect her to play her role, really, not to go about engaging them or challenging them for not delivering. And if that is what she will do, it's okay. It's also, you can see it from a project management perspective. So Mr. President can give anybody that role. I don't expect Mr. President to call an external consultant to do that for now. But it's also good to have an external consultant, for example, that will be providing, that will whisper in the president's ear to say, this. But within the governance framework, there should be somebody that should be coordinating for Mr. President. Otherwise, why doesn't he hire a principal secretary and everybody from outside? Now, I say this to land. This issue is on this side. Now, pushing government to deliver is not just the sole responsibility of Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. It's our responsibility. The civil society organization, the citizens of this country. We also need to put the government on its toes by, pushing, asking for information, making specific demands. Yes, you have done your retreat. These are our own specific, statement of demand. I want the CSOs to be less political and more of doing their job.
But is there room for that too? I mean, Asiegbu earlier mentioned that he was expecting them to invite these parties, the private sectors and the civil societies, to be in this retreat. Mm-hmm. Is there any room from the government, for these people to
Somalia, let's not mix things up. You see, like I said, everybody has his opinion. From my perspective, I don't want to be second-guessing people. I don't want us to have a situation where we have a government and everybody is in there. At what point will we have the neutrality or the position to speak to it? We've had the president engaging NESG and all those stakeholders during campaign and even after campaign to discuss issues, right? Mm-hmm. Now the government should be allowed to do their business of governance. I agree. You can have subject matter experts doing your retreat to come in and speak to some issues, right? But that is not something that has to be done. And if it is not done, like I said, the CSOs and all those other stakeholders also have their natural, what I call the natural role they should play. Whether they are called into that room to make contributions or not, will not remove from them that responsibility they have to play of keeping government in check. And to an extent, if you call me into a conversation, yes, well, sometimes I can say, no, do your job, and then I can appraise you and take you up at the right time. So yes, maybe they could have come in to have that input, to discuss their experiences and how things could be done better. But to my mind, I would rather we continue pushing from the outside to ensure they deliver the mandate they were giving. Otherwise, they shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Okay. Well, Charles, I will let you conclude your thoughts on this in terms of talking about politics and governance. Where do we draw the line here? Because we've seen this, clashing all the time.
So I think in terms of, right or good steps, the president seems to, be in line with taking the right steps. But as a Nigerian and one who has had it all from previous administrations, I don't want to I don't want to base my confidence on what has just been said. I want to see actions, because one thing we have to note is that in the next 2 or 3 years, political will start. So we have a very short window. And that's why I insist that some of these meetings, there are some form of outputs in these meetings where people are able to see, results, even if they are preliminary. So what I would say is, as a final conclusion, is the idea of quick wins is good, and it can be intoxicating. You see people who want to just, low-hanging fruit. They don't want to grab stuff and add it to their achievements. But it sets you apart from achieving the medium to long-term goals and setting the ministry on the right path, even beyond your stay in governance. And that is something some of these ministers should look at. Why they try to settle issues, quick wins, like Mr. Ababa said. You also look at how you can drive processes and rejig systems to work even beyond when you're in that system. And another thing I wanted to say is, it is important that specific ministries outline and marshal out their key issues. I'm very keen on it. I don't like generic talks. If, for example, in the mining sector now, I wrote about it some time ago for the London School of Economics. Lithium is worth about $37 billion. It's a $37 billion market, and by 2050 it will increase for over 500%. And in Nigeria we have lithium, right? Some people are already, there's a plant in Nasarawa, over $200 million plant. These are some of the issues that the Ministry of Mining, for example, can start to talk about. Are there frameworks that we need to put in place? I've heard the subsequent minister talk about how, there are lack of professionals in that field. How do we bring in more professionals so that it's not just illegal miners and artisanal miners? In the youth sector, we have a youth bulge. It's not a problem. It could be a problem, but it's not a problem. We have some of the youngest persons across the world. About 70% of Nigerians are under 30. So how can the Minister for Youth, for example, begin to tap into their creative juices to bring out results? The creative economy by 2025 will be worth about $15 billion. How are we working to be in that space, right? So I don't like the idea that things are spoken in the general sense and this is what you're expected to do. It should be tailored and narrowed down to your specific needs, the specific needs of your sector, and so that you focus on it and bring out results.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Charles Asiegbu, Policy and Development Practitioner, and also Baba Yusuf, a strategist, policy analyst, and Group CEO of Global Investment and Trade Company. We thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning and sharing your insight with us on this new government's retreat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.